The monster that I chose to present to you, my audience today, is Medusa. And just a little introduction about Medusa. She is quite possibly, out of any of the female mythological creatures in the world's mythos today, Medusa is arguably one of the most famous and well-known. Snakes, petrification, and headlessness are the three things that over the years have become inexplicably connected with Medusa. Although Medusa is known mostly as a villain, something meant to be slain by a hero, that was not always the case. And throughout the years, the representation of Medusa in media has constantly changed, shifting from villain and a victim. But which is the actual case? Was Medusa a villain or victim? This presentation will not only showcase the examples of Medusa in different forms of art and media over the ages, but will also explain to you why Medusa is still a monster, regardless of whether or not she's a villain or victim. And after all the images presented to you and explanations, maybe you will be able to answer for yourself by the end of the presentation whether or not Medusa is meant to be something pitied or abhorred. Starting off with her origins, in terms of origins, Medusa was the daughter of Porcus and Ceto, who were the children of Gaia and Okeanos. So pretty much, in a weird way, Medusa was a cousin of sorts to the king of gods, Zeus. She was not always the monstrous form that she was. She was actually considered to be a very beautiful maiden, but it was through unfortunate circumstances that she was transformed into the hybrid human snake that she is known today as. The first story that she was turned into a monster is that she once declared that she was more beautiful than Athena. And so in this version of the story, it was Medusa's hubris that caused to be punished by a deity. The second story involves Medusa getting raped by Poseidon in the temple of Athena. Because Athena was a goddess associated with virginity, she was enraged that one of her priestesses had sexual relations with another, even if it was against her own will. In terms of this story, Ovid even stated that the transformation of Athena was fair. So pretty much, Medusa was transformed into a monster because she was unable to hold her chastity because she had vowed a promise to Athena, a goddess associated with virginity, and she had broken that promise. And after her transformation, she was unable to be a part of society, not because of her looks, but because of her powers as well, which included turning any man who looked at her in her face into a stone statue, and she was banished to a remote and desolate island for the rest of her life. In the many representations of Medusa, there is almost always a hero or opposite intended to slay her. These are just a few represented in popular culture, media, and art. In the game God of War, the hero Kratos fights Medusa. In the cartoon show Powerpuff Girls, the Powerpuff Girls, a group of 3 superpowered girls, fight a villain named Sedusa, who is based off Medusa. In the game Final Fantasy X, the hero or heroine Yuna faces off against a villain named Yunalesca, whose physical form is highly based off that of Medusa. In the film and movie Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson faces off Medusa. And in the game Castlevania, the protagonist usually comes from the Belmont family, who is a family dedicated and sworn to defeating monsters, also faces off against Medusa. I'm going to go over some artworks that depict Medusa first as a victim and as a woman transformed. In these two works, we see Medusa in her transformed state. Yet by looking at both of these depictions of the fierce monster, we can't help but notice the sorrow and almost anguish coming out from both of their gazes. Bernini's bust on the left looks as if it is crying. Böcklin's portrait looks not only sorrowful, but also speechless. Both of these artworks evoke pathos for Medusa, and in this sense, both of these artists, by portraying Medusa in this way, seem to side with the fact that Medusa was a victim, and more so a victim than a villain. These are two paintings by Caravaggio and Rubens, and unlike Bernini and Backlund, these representations of Medusa portray the woman mainly as a monster over a human and a victim. Both of these paintings by the famous artists Caravaggio and Rubens have taken away any of the beautiful qualities that Medusa might have retained in her face. Both of these paintings depict Medusa beheaded with blood squirting out of her neck. It is almost as if to say that these artists are saying that Medusa is something meant to be beheaded. Medusa's humanity is lost in these works, and she is completely portrayed as a monster and a villain meant to be beheaded by the hero Perseus. The first movie that we are going to look at in regards to interpretations of Medusa is The Clash of the Titans, which comes in two versions, and one version in 1981 and one version in 2010. The second movie is Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. And the third version is The Gorgon. This screenshot is from the newer version of The Clash of the Titans. There are two versions of this movie with a span of almost 30 years separating the two versions. The older version depicts Medusa as completely hideous. She is the monster that men do and should fear. The newer version does depict Medusa as half human and half snake, yet at the same time she has retained a somewhat beautiful face, and the face only turns monstrous when she turns men into stone. And it is interesting to note that in both of these depictions, Medusa is depicted as an archer. In Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, she is depicted as a woman, yet she loses her bottom half-snake representation. She's portrayed as somewhat of a seductress, as she does mention in almost of a joke that she had a fling with Poseidon, the protagonist's father. And despite not having a bottom half-snake representation, she moves really fast as if she were half-snake. The Gorgon is an older movie, and it is from 1964. There are no, examples of evidence that she is half-snake in any of the trailers or the clips online, and even the poster itself just portrays the Gorgon as an old woman, and she is considered a real monster because in this depiction, this movie is a horror movie. Like I mentioned before, Medusa is depicted in many video games, and these are the video games that she is depicted in and that I decided to look at. In the God of War series, Medusa is a monster that the hero, Kratos, must kill. She is a complete monster, hideous, sexualized almost, because her breasts are prominent, but there is no trace of beauty left as she has claws and other monstrous traits that a human would not possess. In order to kill Medusa, Kratos, the hero, violently beheads Medusa in a reference to the classical slaying of Medusa in the original mythology. In this version of Medusa, she's a complete monster. There is no reference to humanity other than her speaking voice. In the next game, Heroes of Might and Magic, Medusa is again portrayed as an archer and as half-snake, and she's almost sexualized in the fact that her breasts are emphasized. She still retains her stone gaze power. In the next depiction, the game is called Kid Icarus, and Medusa acts as an antagonist to the game series. She's considered to be she's considered to be the ultimate boss of this game, but she lacks a snake body, but she still has her snake hair. And she is a goddess in this game. She's actually the polarity of Palutena, the goddess of light, and in this game, Medusa is the goddess of darkness. And in Final Fantasy, another game series, Medusa is a boss character, a specialty creature that the hero must defeat. And in terms of the depiction on the right, Yunalesca, she's actually in the storyline of the game, a very tragic figure that turns into a villain, almost like that of the mythological story of Medusa. Castlevania, again, this is a bodiless monster that the hero must defeat, and this monster is also called Medusa. And there are many depictions of Medusa for children, which includes Sedusa, the Powerpuff Girls, Celia May from Monsters, Inc., Medusa from Hercules animated series, and Medusa from American Dragon Jake Long. Sedusa is literally, as the name implies, has the power to seduce men, and her hair can move and grow as she uses it extra limbs. And with her power to seduce, she uses men to get her needs. Somewhat ironic, because before no man would approach her as a monster. Celia May is portrayed in Monsters, Inc., and she is one of the first depictions that portray Medusa as Medusa as a non-monster. She's in love with one of the main characters, Mike, yet she still has snake hair and one eyeball. She plays the ditz, and she's very nice, unlike the other depictions of Medusa. In Hercules animated series, Medusa is featured in one episode. She's featured as more of the victim. She wants to be a normal person, yet she's unable to because of her powers as a Gorgon. She's aided by both her Hades and Aphrodite, and which sort of explains her role as a monster, because she does make a pact with Hades to act as his monster during the night. She's allowed to be human for a while and accidentally turns Hercules to stone, but she ends up saving him, ironically, the villain saving the hero, and they both have a relationship with the help of Aphrodite. In American Dragon Jake Long, Medusa once again acts as a villain. She is a little bit more comical in this depiction, though. The audience is intended for children, and in this depiction, she has the power to hypnotize as well as turn things to stone, and she hypnotizes other girls instead of guys to help her with their bidding, and she is seen interacting more with her sisters, given the chance to be a girl. In this depiction, she makes remarks about beauty, has fights with her sisters, and they bicker about who is the leader, which gives her more human qualities than other depictions. Medusa has functions in modern-day society. The brand name Versace actually uses Medusa's face as their logo, which might be an interpretation of, if you have this brand name, you will be able to stop people dead in their tracks because they will be jealous of you. Also, Athena's Aegis is another use or function of Medusa's head, and the fact that many soldiers would place this design on their shields to protect them in battle. And to wrap up this presentation, in terms of an etiological story, which is an origin story, it has been said that Medusa was created in order to explain the woman's power over men, in order to explain how much the female power has over man when man is in love with that female. Medusa's power involves turning a man to stone, and oftentimes when a man falls completely head over heels for someone, he finds he's unable to act according to his own will. And there have been studies by Freud showing Medusa as an image of ultimate castration. In his studies, it is stated that Medusa is related with the child's thought and discovery of maternal sexuality, and ultimately the denial of this maternal sexuality. Medusa is a monster because, like many other monsters such as the werewolf, Medusa monster is a human that have been transformed into a monster. By definition, Medusa is a monster because she is different. She had been forcibly transformed into other, and in the society, the other was always viewed upon as a monster, something to be ignored and something to flee from. But oftentimes, the actual transformation is overlooked when the monster is transformed. Poseidon and Athena had both been the perpetrators in turning Medusa into a monster, and it seems that society often overlooks the true monsters, which in this case were Poseidon and Athena, just because they are looking for results that fit what they are looking for. By looking at three of Cohen's theses, Medusa just by definition is a monster because she is a metaphor for cultural body. Medusa is born out of Greek culture because they wanted to explain something, and so Medusa reflects the culture of Greece. Medusa is also fulfilling the fourth thesis that she is at the gates of difference. Her form and her powers makes her completely different than a normal person. And finally, thesis 6, many people might fear Medusa, but because of what Medusa stands for, which is falling in love with women, she is actually desired through that fear. So after looking at all these different forms of media, popular culture, and artwork, it can be deduced that society has chosen to make Medusa into a villain because oftentimes the villain is more important and necessary than the victim. One of the reasons that Medusa is most often portrayed